so we're going to have a look at how to make a pattern for a draped armhole, or otherwise known as a COWL armhole. So you're going to need your front pattern, your front block and your back block for the bodice, and we need to have a piece of paper big enough for you to lay out the front and the back bodice with a little gap between them, just a couple of centimetres say, and have a right angle here so that the front and the back are at a right angle to each other. So I'm just gonna pop that line in now. It's a bit fiddly, and I think you might be glad you're potentially only doing this half scale. Let's get that line in. Just enough paper. Now you don't have to have a right angle, it can be a smaller angle, but at the minute we're heading in with a right angle. So these are going to be placed like so, but we don't want the shoulder dart in. So I'm going to put the shoulder darts for the back and the front. I'm going to have them in the armpit, in the armhole. So I'm just going to pivot them out. I'm ignoring the waist darts on these, aiming for a sort of a slouchy fit. You could also put the waist darts into the armhole if you didn't want them, but let's wait till you start playing with the technique to see what it is that you might like best. Okay, so shoulder dart, I'm getting rid of that in exactly the same way as we did in your first year. So hopefully you can drag that all up from memory, or have a look at your, your tech folder to get your head around that. Okay, so shoulder seam closed. And I'm just going to open it at that point and close it. And we don't have to be very particular about what happens, because that is nothing. I'm going to draw around the rest of the block so that you can see what's happening, but actually all we need is the shoulder, the centre, front and the waist. We don't really need to know where all these bits are. The side seam of the armhole, that is, when I'm saying all these bits. Okay, so that's where that dart would be, but we don't care. That's not going to be anything to do with the pattern that we're making. Okay, I would like to have a little bit of separation at the waist there. That is in many ways up to you what that separation is. Now, when I was saying before that they don't need to be at right angles, this could be a little bit more closed up. That would give you a less deep drape on your armhole. But like I say, for simplicity's sake, we're going to go at a right angle here, and I'm going to be pivoting that dart out into the back armhole. Now, for those of you who don't like to pivot, the instruction chart for this shows what it looks like if you use the slashing method. So that's perfectly acceptable that you would use the slashing method. So I'm just going to put the shoulder dart there. So I'm going to pivot it out from its position, because again, we don't really care what's happening in the armhole. We don't really care what's happening with the side seam either. But I'm going to draw it in just so you can see what you've done. Okay, so this is our centre front. This is our centre back. And this, the line between the shoulders, is going to be what creates the drape. This is a mad, enormous pattern piece when you're done with it. So I am going to draw a line between the two shoulder points. Now, if you had wanted to make this a narrower shoulder from the armhole edge, then this would be the time to do it. That's this line in. We then want to give us a facing on that, grown on facing, exactly the same way as we did with the cowl necks. So I'm going to say, because it's deep, I'm going to give it a 5 centimetre facing. And I'm going to keep going for a little bit. Ooh, hoping that I've got enough paper on at that end to complete the task. Before I complete that task, I'm just going to curve off around the waist here, and I'm going to put a little mark central, so that'd be good to know, a good notch to have. So this could be attached to a skirt, it could be attached to trousers, and essentially what it is we're looking at is an item that, this is the waist here, that has a drape that comes from the shoulder like so. So you can see what I mean, that could be attached to just a very simple skirt and suddenly have quite a dramatic dress. So that's what we're doing with this. So hopefully you can see just how simple it is to create. So I'm folding on that first line that we did, the shoulder to shoulder line, and this is to get the angle at which the facing will be sewn in at the shoulder. Oh, I've done a very good folding job there. Okay, just do better than me. Okay, and I'm going to mark off where this shoulder seam is, and shoulder seam, and we'll take this through to the back. And this is where we realise I don't have enough paper on this side, because what we have is a very extreme point. So like I say, this is what sellotape's for. So I'm going to carry on that line that is the line of the facing, and I will carry on that line there. Oops, sorry, following the holes. To create a pattern piece that looks like so. Well, not quite a pattern piece yet. Okay, let's make the pattern piece. This is an enormous pattern piece that you will probably end up putting a seam in somewhere else. So I might need to draw some paper here. Going to be one of my messier patterns, obviously. But I just want you to see what this pattern looks like. Now, we discussed with the other pattern pieces, the cowl necks, how you can cut them on the bias to give them a softer drape. Well, what happens with this one is if you keep the centre front on the straight, the COWL armhole automatically comes out on the bias, so you would have a softer drape. Like I say, I'll cut this out so you can see what happens with it. And I need that extra bit at the top, don't I? Now, if we were doing this in the studio, none of this would be a problem. But my table in my studio is actually not big enough to accommodate a pattern of this size. So like I say, you'll probably be delighted that you're only doing this half scale. Okay, on the chart that I've given you for this particular pattern exercise, it's really easy for you to see what shape the pattern ends up. So I would say absolutely, definitely want to be watching me do this in combination with what happens on your charts that are under units. Okay, I've got all my bits and pieces together, and I'm going to lay the fold of the fabric up against the draft that we've made. Now, when we trace this off, and I guess this is the reason that I'm doing it in front of you in all its big messy glory, is we only need the outside edge. We don't need any of the bits and pieces that have gone on, like the moving of the dart into the armhole, that sort of thing is not needed. So I'm just tracing around the outer extremities. Now the centre front is going to be the fold of fabric, or fold of fabric. It's not going to have a seam, is what I'm trying to say there. The centre back is where it will have its seam. It is ideally, this pattern is made as one big piece. So apart from the centre back and whatever happens at the waist, there aren't any seams in it. You can stick a seam in it wherever you think you would like one, but part of the charm of the draping and part of what makes the draping work easily is the fact that it has no seam. Facing. Because of the nature of the size and the shape of this, you would usually be using the crossways grain as your grain line. You could have, of course, choose to have an opening back and front. Down my centre back, I'm going to give myself 2 centimetres. Whatever that fastening is going to be. Everywhere else I'm going to give it a centimetre. I'm actually going to ignore the shape of the darts, although I will mark them on because they're probably going to become pleats. Centimetre at the shoulder. I'm not going to put any on the long side of the facing. All that on there, that's the facing. This is a fold. This is our centre front. This is our centre back, and It's all happening on this one enormous pattern piece. Right, obviously I haven't done anything with the neckline, but it's just because we're dealing with the technique. Right. And have I gone off camera? Possibly. So your pattern piece is going to be twice the size of this, because I'm now folding it this way, down the centre front, and we're going to cut around its extremities. If you pin the two layers together, you'll get a much more accurate duplication on the underside. I'm not doing that just for the sheer speed of wanting to get this done and dusted. Now when I unfold this to show you how big the pattern piece is, it's not all going to fit. I'll have to slide it past you. Okay, make sure I've got those together again. Don't forget, when you're doing this, you're going to be doing it beautifully. You'll pin them together to make sure that you have an accurate duplication. Oh. Sorry, I'm trying to throw out half the pattern piece there. Okay, stop it. So, we're going to have several notches on this. You will have notches to indicate where that fold is. You'll have a notch top at neck edge, waist edge, for what were the darts, which are now going to be pleats, and for the new side seam. And the pattern piece is this crazy big piece, where you have a pattern front and a pattern back all in one. But like I say, the chart for this shows you much more clearly what happens to that pattern piece. And also, seeing how big it is, you really don't want to be cutting it on the fold, so having a half pattern, it's much more accurate to have the entire pattern. Okay, that's it. That's an underarm cowl. And I'm just going to give it its little pleats there that it would have. Yes, you haven't got to make it, obviously, given the circumstances, but you may want to at some stage. It makes up really nicely in a jersey. Okay, back in a moment.